preparing to live stream the meeting.
Sarah, does it matter that I'm on my phone?
No, we can see you, we can hear you.
Okay.
It's great. Perfect.
I'm a bit blurry, but it doesn't matter.
Don't you worry.
Martha, are you on your laptop? Like, do you have your phone spare? Can you text Oriana how to get onto YouTube?
Live stream the meeting.
I'm on my phone. Sarah, does it matter that I'm on my phone?
No, we can see you, we can hear you.
Okay.
It's great. Perfect.
I'm a bit blurry. But...
Right, we've established that it's working, everybody. So it is streaming to YouTube. I'm just going to double check with the rest of the team that they can see that it's working. So we are live on the old YouTube, but let me just check with them that they can see. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome. This is the first time that we've used the old Zoom for stuff. So welcome to Straw Picking 2020, and the first time that we've done some panel discussions. So I'm really excited to introduce to you Nathan Matthew, who is a professional writer and hosting our panel today. Over to you, Nasa.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for these really powerful and, like, I don't know, mind-blowing pieces, especially I think given that your entire brief had to change midway through, like most of the world. But yeah, I think that is something we'll certainly come back to. What I wondered if we could do is just go round and introduce ourselves and say the piece that we wrote, and maybe sort of a little, but no spoilers please, a little sort of synopsis of what the piece is about. Shall we start with Martha? Is that all right? Thank you. Oh no, I can't hear you, Martha. Of course. Oh, there we go. Oh, no. No, we can't hear you. Oh no. Okay. Do you want to leave? Yeah, or something. Sorry, that's really rude. Just leave. Okay, well, let's try again. Shall we go to Zach?
Yeah. Okay. I'm Zach. I'm Zach Shatiri. I wrote Tenebrosity, and to say it shortly, it's a play about mental health in a very experimental manner.
Yeah, I think that's a great synopsis. Thank you. Rue?
I'm Rue. I wrote the play W, just the letter W. It was a bit difficult to explain. It's about a piece of art that I saw a while ago called My Bed by Tracy Emin, which is sort of this abstract piece of art which has loads of objects thrown about it. And I wrote the play from perspective of some of the objects around the bed in a kind of interesting way, in a slightly bonkers way.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, I think, I really loved it. Should we try Martha again?
Can you hear me now?
You can, yay!
Okay. So I wrote God's Garbage. I'm Martha Maloney, and basically it's just about like teenage girls, from the focus of one teenage girl and her relationship with her friendship group, and then her relationship with her stepmother.
Yeah. Again, really they were all really powerful. And Layla?
I'm Layla Biggs. I wrote the play Repeat After Me, If Not When, and it's about the pressures from society of family, friends, on women to have children, but it's not just about that. It's about what happens when you can't have children, or you just don't want children. And yeah, it's hard to say it without any spoilers.
Yes, sorry.
That's the gist.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary of it. Absolutely. So I'm going to kick off really with what your inspiration was. Like, what was that first spark that made you think, I want to write about this? Or where did it come from? Should we start with you again, Zach?
Yeah, sure. I think it was the idea of finally having the freedom to write what I wanted. And I guess that like having experienced mental health as a child, I never really I never really wrote about it or spoke about it openly. So I thought I'd write about it, write about all different stages, the intricacies, and just kind of section it to 6 parts, which is exactly what I did. And yeah, I came up with that.
Yeah, I think, you know, from when I watched it, it was so detailed, like you could feel the layers and the detail in the piece, that made it feel really, really truthful. And you know, because if you've met one person with mental illness, you've met one person with mental
Yeah.
illness. So in the way that it was so specific and detailed, it equally felt very universal, which is something I really thought you really tapped into really well. Thank you for that. Rue,
Yeah.
I guess your inspiration was the bed, but
yeah.
it's something else.
Yes. My mum took me to see this piece of art. And I just thought it was really interesting. I remember not quite believing that it was art because it felt so weird and sort of, yeah, not like it could be art. And I've also been quite interested in comedy for a while. So I knew that when we wanted to write plays, I wanted to write something that maybe was a little bit silly in some places, and a bit sort of bonkers. So sort of played with that and wanted to do something a little bit outside the box. So I
Yeah,
wrote from the spectrum of the objects.
yeah, I think you totally 100% achieved that. You know, when I started watching it, I was like, I just wasn't expecting, you know, that at all, and I just thought it was so surprising. I really love Brigitte. I'm terrified to get her name wrong, Brigitte.
Yeah.
I just thought that was so well written, and the detail in her, and the joy that she has of this idea of you know, being put in Tracy Emin's mouth, I thought was really, really funny. And I think you struck that balance very well.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Thank you, Martha.
For me, it was just about like writing what I knew. For me, it's very personal. I don't know, it's just about being a teenage girl, and I got the inspiration from actually leaving my old school, which I was at for 5 years, which is like the complete opposite, the other end of the spectrum compared to Brit. Brit is so liberating and opening and free, whereas that was my old school was very condensing, and it you know, made one type of person only, and I was not that type of person. So that was something that was very hard for all of the people around me and for myself. It's not autobiographical, I don't know the word, but
Autobiographical.
there we go. Yeah, embarrassing.
Well, I was going to say, I just felt, even though it's not autobiographical, I just felt again such a sense of truth from it, you know. And there was something about, I was a teenage girl a long time ago, and the world's changed a lot. But there was something again very universal about that, the pain of being a teenage girl and how difficult it is. But I can't imagine that layer of social media as an extra pressure. And I really sort of pricked up my ears. I was like, well, this feels really authentic and really truthful. And I think the pain in it as well, you could really feel a kind of an emotional pain. I think that was probably in terms of the root of her parents' breakup, and the adding of that footage of when she was a little girl, that was very, very impactful. So yeah, well done. Thank you for sharing that. And Layla?
I got my inspiration pretty much just because being a female my whole life, I've got literally from the moment I could breathe, I've heard people ask, oh, do you want kids? Do you want children? And people are beyond shocked when I say no, I don't. And it's a massive thing to them. And that has always really annoyed me. And it's in the title of my play. It's always when do you want kids, not do you want kids? And that's always really struck me. And I'm really into feminism. I'm a strong feminist. So I knew that I wanted to write about something like that. And I just decided to kind of hone in on a particular subject that I was passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you can feel that passion, like it leaps out of the speakers or in whatever way you're listening to it. And the characters feel very in whatever way, and which I think, you know, I don't want to speak for all women, but certainly as a woman, sometimes you feel you can't win. You know, if you have kids, you know, you're looked down upon. If you don't have kids, you're looked down upon. And I say that as somebody with 2 children myself, and the pressure. So I felt again a real sense of authenticity and pain around that dilemma. So yeah, I think very, very well done as well. And I sort of like the dystopian aspect to it as well. The experiments that were going on. I thought that was really,
Yeah.
a really interesting take.
Thank you.
So yeah, no, you all did really well. Thank you for sharing that. I hope it hasn't spoilt it for anyone, and instead just encouraged everyone to go and watch these brilliant pieces. What I want to talk about now is, so as everyone probably knows, and you guys more than anyone, this project massively changed midway through, and yeah, I just wanted to sort of ask you about what that was like, and what the difficulties were there any like resistance from you, because these are originally, for anyone who doesn't know, the season is about plays, is about writing for live performance, and unfortunately we're in a situation as a world and as a country where that was not possible. So yeah, maybe if we can just, whoever sort of wants to take that question to start with, to talk about what that felt like, to suddenly go, okay, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. You know, sometimes pressure can make people more creative, but also it can be like, oh my gosh, this isn't what I wanted it to be. So yeah, do you want to kick us off with that question?
Yeah, I will.
Great, thanks, Zach.
Cool. Okay, so my play was like very physical theatre based, so in person, working together. So when it was announced it couldn't be put on in person, it was a shock. So there was a lot of communication with my director, to work out, you know, what could be put on, what couldn't be put on, and agreeing where we could change things. And there were definitely changes that had to be made. I think there was some stuff filmed in person. When you watch it, you see that.
Yeah.
And without the physical theatre, it still works. And yeah, it still communicates what I want it to communicate, which is great. But then you also feel like, you know, I really want it to be put on in person. And you kind of keep feeling that. You're like, you know, it's quite hard, you know, when you put your work in a certain way, it's changed. You're almost like, it's kind of unfair.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, you have to understand that, you know, it's art and it's not always perfect. And you just have to accept that even though it's been changed, it's still just as beautiful as you plan it to be.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of accepting that change.
Yeah, I think that's a really lovely and honest answer about it, and it's certainly something I've felt about my own art, that it feels unfair to ask us to change, you know, and it's not anyone's fault, you know, it's not Sarah's fault or anything like that, but it just, I don't know, on a primal level it feels unfair that the offer has changed. And I think I got that sense from your piece, actually, that there was a physicality to it. It felt very visceral, and very, very tangible as a piece, particularly like all of the mixed media as well, and that, you know, it was constantly kind of changing. But I feel your pain as well. And what were the conversations that you had with so was it how did the physical elements that you talk about, the physical piece of theatre, what was the method, or how did you change those to fit this medium?
I think it was a lot of creative shots, and angles, but also the cast working together very well. I think for that shower scene, it was meant to be, there was a specific way I wanted it to be, so we had to communicate so it looked like, no, it looked very similar. I don't really know. I think it kind of just happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I completely hear that. Like sometimes the brain just kicks into gear and you just find a way, don't you? You're not like haven't got a methodology to it. Yeah, I think that was I think you did a fantastic job. Yeah. Anyone else? How did you find? Thank you, Zach. That that transition and the offer changing?
I think for me, I didn't have as much trouble as Jax, I think, because mine wasn't physical theatre based. It didn't need that. It's lots of conversation, and I feel like that made it a lot easier for my director because it is actually people addressing a camera. So it kind of worked out quite well for that. But at the same time, I think it felt limiting, maybe comedically, for the show, because I think a lot of comedy, is through looks and through energies and through stage expressions that you catch on a stage and you see snippets of, and I think it's really difficult to capture that through camera all the time. And I think the cast and my director did a great job of doing that, but I think there are bits that couldn't just be achieved just because it's not on stage. And I think physicality is another thing. It's so hard to show physicality through a camera, and lots of my play was about like physicality and sort of odd characterizations. So yeah, but I kind of think of it like this is just an interpretation of the play. I think they did a brilliant job. It's just a version, and there can be other versions, and this is amazing to see that it works this way as well. So that was really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really positive outlook in terms of that it is a version, and that it can be translated elsewhere, and you've in a way like tested out the story, you know, the characters and the world, and that all works, and it's just about what medium that it goes in. How much, out of interest, how much was written in terms of like actual play script?
Oh, gosh, that's a great question. So I think I'd written a lot of stage direction. So I think, and they did a great job of communicating that. So yes, they included most of, so my script was fully included, but there were extra bits added in, which I think helped it to make sense through a screen, which was necessary. So like an introduction that maybe you'd get on stage. For example, I was going to do a split stage, which isn't really possible with something on the stage, which wasn't able to happen through a screen. So I think some of the stage direction could be taken in, but they did a great job of using as much as they could of what I've written.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for that, Rue. Martha, how did you find that?
I was going to say, when we first found out, it was something that my director and I spoke about, Jess, of whether it should be a radio play or a film. And it was that question of a lot of my play is very scenic and cinematic, and I didn't want to lose that. But then also like not being in the group setting with a radio play, you can imagine they're all together. Whereas when you see it on film, you can see that they're disconjointed, and it was no longer them in the cafeteria, it was them FaceTiming. But what came out of that was like a real enhancement of the idea of social media and the messaging and the group FaceTiming, which actually is so relevant for today, because especially through quarantine, that's what we've been doing. And I'd say my favorite moment, which came out of it being from quarantine and on film, was Oriana, who plays Biz. There's a scenic moment, I'm not going to say too much, and she's singing a cover to the song which I recommended in the script, and she's doing loads of different things, like in her bedroom, in a reaction to what's happened, in a way of living. And it was that montage, and I just thought that's so personal and beautiful, and that wouldn't have you wouldn't have seen that on the stage. So of course there are things that I think, oh God, I would have loved that, and you would have seen the humor in that more if she could have like hit her, and you could have seen her reaction. But actually there's so much beauty that came out of it. I'm really happy.
Absolutely, I completely agree. Like I think the intimacy that comes off of the screen and that you feel as an audience member watching was really, really powerful in doing. And this, you know, I don't want to say that, but there's a bit as well that isn't, you know, there isn't any humans on screen, shall we say that again, that being inside somebody's brain, you know, and even seeing, you know, typing appear and then go away, and like that feels so intimate and intricate. So I'm glad it was a really positive experience. Thank you, Martha. Layla?
I was going to say, I kind of sympathize with Zach a bit, because the scenes where the experiment's taking place, there was meant to be a physical theatre with that.
Right.
Because it's so hard not to spoil anything.
Oh, sorry.
There was no, it's fine. There wasn't to be physical theatre with that, but I think I'm also quite lucky in the sense that my play was quite versatile. So when I was speaking to Maya, the director of my play, when we were talking about it, we basically just came to the conclusion that the only thing that would properly change is that physical theatre bit in those scenes. And when I was listening to it this morning, I was thinking, well, actually, it's kind of nice that it's a radio play and you can't see the people, and all you have is to distinguish between characters is the differentiation in voice. But I kind of liked that you couldn't see the characters, because it's this whole idea of all of them are the main characters, all of them are women, all of them are dealing with the same problem, all of them are dealing with the same pressures, the same subject matter, and it kind of just generalizes how much women struggle with these things. And I think that's kind of, yeah, I really like it, actually. I'm quite lucky that I didn't encounter too many problems. I'm sure that Maya did, and I do feel quite bad about that, but the actual play is quite versatile, so I'm quite lucky like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what was really clear about your piece is that there's such a clear distinction of voices, like not just like literally in the people speaking, but the characters are really distinctive in terms of their wants and their objectives. So immediately you can see it in your own mind when you're listening to it. So, and it's really clear about what journey they're going on. And you know, the more experimental piece has a very distinct tone to it, and you know when you're flipping between worlds. So yeah, I thought that worked really well. And you know, to be honest, none of these I would have ever said that they were in the nicest possible way, that they were intended to be plays. Like they all so work as you have presented them. I'm just going to check, I'm not being rude, I've got Sarah messaging me potential questions. I just want to make sure I haven't missed that. I don't think she's messaged me yet. Oh no, she has. And I'm being a bit quiet, which I've missed. I was just going to ask you guys one more question for my own interest, and then we'll go to the world. I wanted to ask you about if there's anything now, knowing all that you know and having seen your pieces sort of finally come together, is there anything you've learnt, and also anything you'd change? It's a big question. Maybe have a think about it for a couple of seconds. Shall we go to Layla?
Sorry, I just trying to think. I think that so it's what I've learned and what I change,
and what you, yeah, if anything, it might be not anything that you change.
I actually, when I was listening to it, I felt quite proud in the sense that I put a lot of effort, especially with Viv and Dan, especially with them, to make it so realistic and not the cringy romance you see on terrible teen dramas and stuff. It's like and just with Clara and her mum and everything, and just all these characters, I try to make it so real in the language and how people actually talk, because it's naturalistic. And so when that came across, I was really, really proud of that. I think that what I might have changed was the length of some scenes, maybe, because even listening to some, I thought, even though I knew what it was and I'd written it myself, I was kind of like, that could have gone on a bit further, or I could have maybe said something more there, so that character made their point more, or but then also that some scenes could have been shorter and that space could have been taken up with some other characters or something. But yeah, I'm actually very proud, and I don't think I changed that much. Yeah. I'm really happy with it.
Absolutely, yeah. I think you totally should be. And hey, Martha, so
I was going to say the biggest thing I learned is the benefits of hearing your work out loud. And so I think this was the first time I'd ever heard someone or all these people say my work, and it was like, wow, not only was it incredible, but also when I was watching, there were a couple of things I thought, oh, but a person would never say that. Oh, and it's the idea of taking it forward, having other people, if I write more, having other people read my work, or like hearing it aloud to hear how it would be performed, not just in my mind, my vision, bring it to life.
Such a fantastic point. I think that's permanently my, as a writer, my state of being is that you think it sounds like something in your mind, or even when you've written it down, and then suddenly, you know, you have to hand it over to use a unfair metaphor, like a child. You know, you sort of go, here's my baby, and then some people interpret it in a totally different way that you never expected, which you were like, oh my gosh, that makes me look so good, keep doing that. Or then some things, there are things that just, you know, or maybe I can tweak that, but really, you know, it is a live medium, whether it's a film, a radio, or an actual play, and it's never a literary, you know, it's never intended to just be it's not a novel. So I think there is a negotiation that goes on between writers and directors and the actors, and kind of all have to come together. So yeah, really a really great point. And yeah, it doesn't get any easier. That's all I can say. Thank you, Martha. Rue?
I think my point's quite similar to that, about learning to give your work over and put full trust in the director. I think I found that challenging at first, because what you said about like, this is my baby, this is my work. And obviously Kieran, my director, I had full trust in him and was really excited to see what someone else thought of it. But I think we sort of made a conscious decision for me to not be too involved, because I think that would cloud his initial interpretation of it. And I think the point of writing something like that and giving it over is so that he can read it how he wants, and he can put it on how he wants, and my words are just my words, and I'm always going to have a way I see it and wanted to see it. And I actually think it's very different to how I imagined it, but I love the way it's turned out, because I don't think it's rarely going to match what you imagine. You know, you're writing it from your mind onto a piece of paper, and someone else is reading those words in a completely different way, in a completely different environment, and picking them up and relating it to their own lives. And I think learning that it's not going to be the way that I exactly planned it as I was writing it is fine, and learning to let go and put trust, and knowing that that's just one version of the play. So
yeah, completely. And the audience come into that as well, you know, because even though you've handed it over to the director, and then the directors you know, handed it and created it with the actors, you know, the kind of, for want of a better word, control, or, you know, reaction that the audience have is something that is so personal to them. And I guess that's about the generosity of, in a way, of being a writer. Like, you think you have ultimate control, but actually you are sharing something with the rest of the world.
Completely.
Yeah, thank you, Rue. Zach?
Yeah. So in terms of changing things, I think I wrote the whole thing kind of like in a one take, kind of like I made an active choice not to change anything after writing it, just because it kept it raw, and you know. But when listening to it, I was like, some of this is very wordy. Like, there were definitely things I could alter just to make it a little bit more just easier, softer for the listener, and the actors, of course. And what I've learned, I think it's just that people do understand what you want. Like, they're competent and they're advanced and they know what they're doing. So when you're like, oh my God, these people just won't get it, they probably will. So, you know, there's not as much to be concerned about as you think. And then, yeah, some people just really bring it together. Like, seeing some of those people acting out my work, I was just like, this is really, really good. Like, yeah, it's like people are like, oh, what you've written is good, but until it's being put on by that person, the person makes it. And yeah, that's probably what I've learned.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, so it's sort of like a coming that, you know, that your writing is one piece of the puzzle, and then everyone else is bringing their bits, and together, yeah, I think that's a really fantastic learning thing. I'm just going to go to the I can't think of the word, which is terrible as a writer. I'm going to go to the questions, which is, we've had this one. What was it like having to give your work over to someone else to direct, or does somebody else want to talk about that? Maybe who didn't?
I don't mind.
Yeah, you go for it. So I'm just going to switch my earphones over because I realised they're in the wrong hole. Thank you, Layla.
Yeah, so I was just I was thinking off the back of what Zach said. When I was in the workshop groups in script writing, getting my ideas together, I remember showing a scene to everybody in the workshop group, like a mock-up of a scene, and I can't remember who it was, but they turned to me like, God, lady, you're not really giving the actors much choice, are you? Because I'd put so many stage directions, and I'd put, you know, like how the actors should say it and stuff. And so I came to the realization, like, I can't do that. Because, and when I was listening to it this morning, it's like similar to what Rue said, I was writing it thinking, this character's controlled, this character's calm, this character's put together. But then the actor might not think that, and the actor can have their own interpretation of it, and that's okay. And I think it's just coming to terms with that's okay, and just I had to make a conscious effort to go, before handing in my play, go over it and take out a lot of the stage directions, because I was just like, the control freak in me was like, no, do it, keep them. And I was like, no, I can't, that's not fair. It's not fair on anyone, because it also makes the director's job a lot harder, I feel like. And yeah, I think just learning to say, actually, it's okay. Like, they're never ever, no one is ever gonna, actor or director, see it from how you were at your desk writing the play, and that's all right. And as long as they do a good job at whatever interpretation they've done, which everyone in my play did, I'm so happy with that. And it actually turned out that when I was listening to it, at points I was like, I actually think I prefer this interpretation to my original thought process for the character. But yeah, that's
I completely hear that. I think that's all part of it as well. Like, is that this handing over and allowing it to become something that you didn't quite know what was in there, but it has, you know, it still has merit, or is even better than what you'd anticipated. I'm going to go back to the questions. Sorry, give me 2 seconds. What ideas did you need to cut? And we kind of talked about this before getting to your final draft of the play. Was there anything specific that you cut? Martha?
Yeah, can I? I was going to say, because we were on a small limit of about like 20 pages, it was the idea we had to condense the storyline very much so. So my original draft was much longer, and it was a realization that I had to make it more concise, yet still, I hope, get the story to unfold. So I think in the way I originally wrote it, it was slightly slower in the breakdown of the girls' friendship. And how that like dramatic switch to, oh my god, you've done this, we don't associate with you anymore. And I think I had to cut a lot of that out, so it was more dramatic than I intended, and it raised the stakes higher. But actually seeing it today on the screen, I thought, oh, that's great, they did such a good job. That was needed. It makes it more interesting.
Yeah, you can feel there's a real tension in the piece that you can really feel. Yeah. Anyone else there's a horrible phrase that people have, it's like killing your babies. Sometimes you have to do that in the spirit of trying to find the heart of the piece. Rue, did you have to cut anything?
Yes, actually, I cut a whole character.
Oh wow.
I know.
A dramatic cut.
Yes, it was a very dramatic cut. I had 6 objects. And I can't remember what it was. Oh gosh, what was it? Oh, it was a contraceptive pill. It was a very sort of sturdy woman who I think had like very slicked back hair and was sturdy. And I just realised that the piece was too long, and that also I think something I like about the play is that the characters are also different. Like I made a really conscious effort to make them complete extreme opposites. and I feel like this one character sort of merged them more than I wanted them to be merged. I don't know if that makes sense. I feel like she was too similar to each of them a little bit, and also it was a bit long, so I cut her, which actually I'm glad I did, because I think, because it's basically a series of monologues, I think I don't want it to drag, so I'm glad that there's 5 shorter monologues.
Yeah, absolutely, and sort of streamlining into making sure that there's no repetition, I suppose.
Yeah, completely.
Which is always a tricky balance when you're writing, because you want to make sure that your audience sort of understand the world that you're creating and the characters and who they are. But I think hats off to you for cutting a whole character. That is very brave.
Thank you.
Did anyone else have to cut? It was specifically around final drafts. Sorry, I'm just gonna before getting to the final draft of your play, you didn't cut anything back.
No,
No,
I
oh,
didn't.
great. Yeah,
That's
good
so
on you for
lucky.
holding to it. Yeah. Layla?
I was just saying that's so lucky that Zach didn't have to. Because I remember having this wasn't too near the end, it's quite near the beginning actually, but it kind of followed me through the whole process. There was this, I think it was an elderly couple called, well, the woman was called Esme, I can't remember what I called the man. And it was just about them being quite a sweet couple, and they don't have kids. And it was kind of just to show, that's okay. And, you know, they've lived a happy life together and are still very much in love. And they've done that without the need with children, because both of them don't want, or I still hadn't decided whether it was because they don't want or because they couldn't. I'm not sure. But I thought that was quite a nice concept to have, maybe even if they just had like one scene. But it was just that I didn't have, it was 2 reasons that there wasn't enough space, and also because I think it might have also lowered the stakes in a sense. Like I think it would have kind of just cancelled out a lot of the powerful points that I was trying to make. So it's probably for the best that they got cut, but I also got quite attached to them. So it was hard to.
Yeah, it's very hard. And also it makes me think of, like, I guess because a lot of the stakes in most dramas, but in your one in particular, is that unknown, isn't it? It's that balancing act between, if I have a kid, will my life be like this? If I don't have a kid, will my life be like this? And if you see somebody who in the future, who is older, who has made either one of those decisions, it takes away that unknown a little bit. So I think that's a really again another astute observation. I'm just going to go back to my questions. Was the final result was the final result how you had imagined when writing your piece? Should we go to Zach for that one?
Yeah, okay. It's funny because I didn't really have, I don't know, I didn't really have like a final expectation, I guess. I mean, it all came quite fast, you know, like one day I didn't have anything, next day the whole thing was written. I was like, well, okay. But I don't think I expected it to be as weird as I made it. I mean, because, you know, life's not that weird. And I wanted it to be quite, you know, true. And I managed to get that truthfulness into this like experimental, weird flipping play. So yeah, I didn't really have any expectation at the start, but I guess I did manage to keep that truthfulness that I wanted when I began.
Yeah.
So I guess in a way, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great, thank you. Same question to you, Martha.
I'm not sure really. I think I had like a very definitive idea of what I thought in the school uniform and the cafeteria, and the theme of that like completely changed to again the chat room calling. But I love that, I think. Yeah.
So you were it wasn't what you had in mind, but it was still something that you absolutely loved. And
yeah, it changed a lot, but I was very grateful for that. I think sometimes like an issue I could have is holding on to this idea and being like, it's gonna be like this, but then letting it go and seeing like a whole different approach on it. I was like, oh, I'm so glad they did it like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Rue?
No, actually, I don't think it was how I imagined. But then I don't know what I did imagine, because I don't think you know what it's going to be like until it's there. I think I'm the opposite of Zach though, because he said he did his all at once, and mine was, I think, very meticulously planned. We did workshops in groups before, and actually Zach did the workshops that I ran, and I gave out the objects that I was planning to write characters from, and everyone like inspected them in detail and wrote things about them. So I think I had many weeks of like knowing exactly what I wanted my characters to be, and planning it exactly, and doing spider diagrams of their traits and blah blah blah. And I think maybe that wasn't the most helpful thing for me, because it makes a very specific type of, I had it in my mind, a very specific type of the way I thought it was going to be. During the process, I've learned to like let go of that and embrace the amazing thing that they have come up with, which is part of what I've learned as well. So
absolutely, it's great that you're so open to it, you know, having gone from such quite a strict, you know, idea of what it was to it not being what you want, but it's still being very open and, you know, collaborative, I suppose, in that sense, to somebody else taking on the idea. Thank you. Layla, was it how you imagined it?
I think that it is and it isn't. I'm similar to Rue. I knew from the start what I wanted to do, and it took me a while to actually get it up and running, but when I did, because I'd been thinking about it for so long and I'd come up with these quite strong and distinctive characters, I had a really specific way of how I wanted them. And even today, like listening to like say one character's certain line of how I imagined it being said, and they said it differently, I was like, oh god, this is a bit weird. But then again, it's something that I've learned as well, like you cannot tell someone to say a line a certain way just because you've written it how you think it would be. Like you can't do that. And then I learned to love it, and I've actually, again, like I said, I think I like it more how the characters changed, and that's how I think it also didn't turn out how I think, because the characters are quite different, some of them, but it didn't turn out how I think, because obviously it's a radio play, but I'm so shocked that it turned out so good as it did as a radio play, because when I was writing it, obviously I was writing it with the thought process that I'd be doing it, it'd be on stage, but I'm so surprised that it worked as well as it did in radio, so it's comforting.
Absolutely, great. I've got another question here. Sorry, it's so high tech, but I have to do it via. So in your exploration workshops that were done as part of the script writing lessons, what was the main focus whilst collaborating with your peers? How did you explore the topics you focused on? So Rue, you kind of talked a little bit about that. I don't know if you want to expand. Like you said that you give the actors that you were working with like objects and ask them to riff on that?
My workshops are very weird, and I'm glad they were. It consisted of a variety of things. One of them, me giving out a bottle of vodka and a condom and a pair of tights, and just people inspecting them and commenting on them. It also consisted of, I think, I did some work on merging, sort of getting in touch with being an object, because I wanted the characters to not feel too human. I wanted them to, people to still know that they are objects. These are objects personified. So I did an exercise where I made the actors lay on the floor and I just placed objects over them, which I don't know how beneficial it really was, but I think for me it was getting in the idea that the human and the object will become one. So I did some odd exercises like that, but I think they helped me to understand the idea that I was going for.
Yeah, I love that about it, that the objects, they still felt so intrinsically true to the nature of them, you know, my idea as a human, as what that object is, but you also really brought them to life and, you know, gave them an idiosyncrasy, I don't know that word, I don't know, a real sense of self and identity. So yeah, I thought that was really, really good. Was there anything else you did as part of your, did you then write down, did people say things and then you wrote down?
Yes. I think because I wanted the objects to have good stories to tell as well, because obviously they all have a background story and that's sort of what they tell to the camera.
Yeah.
I was thinking, I need to have some good stories that they can have, or good journeys to get there. So I got some people to tell just good stories that have happened to them. So I think everyone has a collection of like good stories that they tell of things that have happened to them.
Yeah.
So I remember putting my phone on like record in the middle of a circle, and we just went around and told some funny things that had happened to us, and some like crazy stories and stuff that had happened to friends. And I feel like that just gave me an inspiration of, number one, how people tell stories. How do different people portray things that have happened to them? Some people said it very matter-of-factly, which I feel like I took on with the character of Gareth, just sort of telling his narrative as a block, a solid block. But then other people go into too much detail. So I think that really helps as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so insightful. Thank you. Martha, how did you work in the workshops?
I use the workshops as a way for me to distinguish every character as an individual. I think when I was writing, that was an issue for me. The worry of, is it going to blend? Are people going to go, but why is that character there? They're just saying the same thing as that person. So what I did was I gave everyone in my group, we were all girls, so I gave everyone a line, which was from one of each characters, and then they played around with that line, and I recorded how they were saying it, interacting with each other. And then when they did a drawing of what they thought their character would look like, and some like key descriptions and what they think their favorite color was, and to me that just helped like create 3-dimensional human beings. And get an insight and have that conversation. So yeah,
that's really clear when you know, particularly when you watch the scenes where they're all together on a Zoom, not too similar to this one, and you can really hear the language and the tone that each of them has. They're very, very distinct. So it sounds to me like you laid the roots very well to not and to give each one a clear sort of want, even if it, you know, if some people were more sort of angry than others, or, you know, darker than others in their intentions, they were all very, very clear. That's fantastic. Thank you. Zach, how did your workshops go?
I just did weird stuff, I guess. I think one of the exercises was they all had a rich tea biscuit, and they walked around the room and they spoke to it.
I'm gonna write that one down. I might do that one.
And it was all, it was all sorts of weird stuff. A lot of it was thought up on the spot, you know. I just wanted to see what experimental stuff could people do, and actually looked pretty good. The biscuit one was probably my favorite, to be fair.
So how did it work? What did they have to say to the biscuit? How did it?
Whatever they wanted. And then, like, I think one of the people in the workshop, you know, ate their biscuit too early. I was like, you know, so I had to, you know, react.
Bit of cannibalism in there.
Exactly. It was horrific. I did another exercise where they had to lay down, and I put a biscuit on their face and got to like smell it, but with their eyes shut. And it was all about just, you know, the senses and how weird stuff could get, because that was kind of what I wanted to have. So I just explored it with no real construct of the play in mind or characters. It was just weird stuff happening with people.
So a real sense of, it feels like your piece came out of a lot of play, really, and sort of like a lot of what I talk about when I do writing workshops is sort of like the chaos mind and the structured mind. And actually you were kind of in the joyful way and in a really productive way, like trying to find things out of, like in the chaos way, and sort of like just playing and experimenting and seeing what washed up.
Yeah, Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Layla, what was your process like in the workshops?
I was just finding that quite funny. I completely forgot about Zach's exercise, but I remember I was in the room and our group, because I was in a different group, our group was just looking like, I bet it's worth it, but like, what is going on? But in my workshops, I used it to get an insight into other people's opinions on the topic. Not even just because I had a pretty 50-50 boy-girl ratio in my group, and I also found it interesting to find out the boys' opinions on it all. So I just asked like series of questions, because at the end of the day, I know my opinion on it. I know that I'm not like very maternal. I don't want kids, but where's that going to get me? Like, I had to find out what other people were thinking, and not just from my age either. Oh, this is going a bit out of the workshops, but I obviously had to ask around different age groups of women, and also because I had such a massive focus on the language being so real and really realistic. I did a lot of scene read-throughs, so got people to act as Viv and Dan or Clara and Alex, and all of these people, just so I could keep hearing it and thinking, right, does that sound natural, or does that sound really like no one would say that? So yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah, great. Again, sounds really like a real sense of rigor to it, and just, you know, digging and digging and digging until you found exactly what it is that you wanted it to be. But I thought it was really interesting what you said about, you know, not just it not being a polemic, in that it's not just what you want to say about the world, and that trying to, you know, have a question at the heart of it, I suppose, which it felt really clear to me that there was a question. I won't want to put onto you what my question is, like what I think the piece is asking, but I think that sounds really to go in with that, like objective to a piece, rather than it just being, well, this is what I think and this is it. I think is a really positive way, and it was a way to bring the audience in as well, because nobody wants to be lectured to. They kind of want to explore it in their own right. Probably got time just to see if there's any more questions from Sarah. Sorry, give me 2 seconds.
Can I just say, I'm just going to go and get my charger. I'm not just randomly walking off. Didn't want to look like I was just leaving.
No, not at all. The next question is, when we return to normal, which I guess means hopefully being able to put plays on stage again, please, do you want to redo them on stage? Should we start with you, Rue?
Absolutely, yes. I would absolutely love to do that. I mean, I'd quite like to be in it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because I think we don't forget that we're all actors as well, that sort of tried writing, I think, rather than writers. So yeah, that was another thing. I think I had this urge of like, I want to be in it as well. It's exciting.
Yeah.
So yes, I would absolutely love to do that, and just see how it differentiates when they can look at each other as well, because I think there's a lot in eye contact, and especially with my characters, I think a pair of tights looking at a condom in the eyes is something that I'd quite like to see.
Yeah.
So yes, I would absolutely love to.
Oh, great. Zach?
Yeah, I mean, with the physical theatre, it would change it a lot. And yeah, seeing it a different medium, you know, having the like creativity and the space to do that be really cool. And just having a taste of the exact form that I was writing it for would maybe just, you know, satisfy more of my brain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Martha?
Yeah, definitely just going on from what Zach said and agreeing with that. I'd love for it to be on stage and to have that taste, as he was saying, to experience that and see it in the way that I had planned with my writing, in the more school sense. So yeah, be great for everyone to do that.
Absolutely. And Layla?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to, similar to Zach, to see if the physical theatre makes a big difference or not. Because I'm not too sure actually. Seeing it, I mean, hearing it without the physical theatre, because it worked just as well, I feel like. And also because to see like if the characters' physicalities are how I imagined, or if they're not, or yeah, just to see the actor's spin on the physicalities.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the other thing to think about is the audience as well. Like it's very different audience reaction, and the way in which they're receiving it, and all sorts of things. I think we've got about 1 more minute. I was just going to go around and sort of ask you about like audience reactions and how you think that might differ in the real normal world, or what your audience reactions for anyone who's seen it so far has been like. Shall we start with Martha?
Yeah, I'd just say for the audience interactions, it'd be nice to see if people understood the humor, the dark humor, because obviously, like, you're watching it on a screen, you don't get to see how people react, but to see if, like, I got that, if people can understand that, or if I'm hitting at something which is irrelevant. But in terms of audience reactions so far, I've had like peers message me and be like, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only person that said that, and you say that as well, and that's so weird. And I was like, it's the validation that what I'm writing is in some sense universal, and that it's being understood from people like me is the best feeling ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I'm so pleased. You so deserve it. Thank you. Zach?
Yeah, I think people. My brain's just gone for a second.
Oh no,
sorry.
don't worry.
I think people reacting to it in a way that I think people just seeing a part of my life, I guess, because it is very personal to me. People watching it is really interesting, and just people actually appreciating all the weirdness, because when you write something, you always overthink it, I guess, and you think, is this good, is this not? But then when you let it go and let people watch it, it's great. And yeah, just taking that feedback.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Layla?
I think that I hope that people find some sort of comfort in like that they're not, these characters are also people who don't want children, or who do really, really want children as well, and that it's also okay to not know, especially at this age, because so many things can change in your life. I think my play is a bit hard in the sense that obviously the majority of people listening to it will be my age or around, and so with certain characters' problems, like with infertility, or not having a partner, or just what not, trying not to spoil. It's really hard, so like I just got a filter on, but so it's hard for people my age to kind of relate to that, because we don't know that yet. But I hope that people who are older maybe don't think when they're listening to it, oh, she's been insensitive with that, or because it took a lot of research. It took a lot of research, like a lot of my time was spent on that. So I hope that I've done it justice, and I haven't been insensitive, and I've tried to be as accurate as possible, and I hope that comes across.
Yeah, I mean, for me, absolutely it does. Like the research and the care really comes across in it, and not in the way that it feels like research that's been treated with care and generosity, and characters that are struggling. We want to see characters that are in difficult situations, that are trying to achieve something. So I think you absolutely smashed it in that respect. Thank you. Rue, what's your reaction been like? The audience reaction been like, and what do you think it might be like if it was real in real life?
Well, first of all, I think it feels very exposing. It just does. I think especially writing a sort of quite a silly play, it's directed at my sense of humour, I guess, of me being a bit silly. I remember when I was younger, me and my mum used to do slightly silly characters when we were messing around, and like silly voices. And I feel like I've used a lot of that, like silly childhood, doing silly characters, silly voices, like books, silly voices from books and things. I mean, it's still realistic and adult, but in a different way. I feel like I've taken the silliness and made it adult, in a very dry way sometimes, dry humour. So I guess I hope that people share similar humour with the silliness for me. And yeah, I don't know, I think it's very difficult not knowing how your audience is reacting because it's online. So I have no idea what people are thinking as they're watching it. But I hope that it just is like a light-hearted sort of joyful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, certainly, yeah. Brilliant. Is that, are we at our time now, Sarah? I don't want to.
It's 20 past, so we've got to the end.
Okay.
Yeah. Huge thank you, Nathan, for hosting a fabulous workshop earlier and for our first ever strawberry picking panel online. And it worked. Yeah.
Well,
And
thank you all for being so generous with your contributions and really open. I really appreciate your time.
no, thank you, Nasa, and
Thank you so
congratulations
much.
writers for kicking off our season in such a brilliant fashion. If you have watched one of the films today and you are inspired, please head over to the website on details of how you can take part in our Theatre 503 Rapid Write Inspired programme. And we're back here at 2:15 with Rachel Lincoln talking to the directors of today's plays. Panellists, if you can stay where you are, I'm going to stop streaming to YouTube. But thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you later.